Hello. Yes, absolutely. That's right. It is Friday and we are live. We are live on LinkedIn. We're live on YouTube. We're live on Facebook. And welcome to everybody. This week, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Mr. Jamie Squires. Jamie is the human dynamo. He is a ninja. He works with businesses who have, I suppose, a workforce who are slightly disparate and have got an awful lot of different things going on. And yeah, he changes their lives in revolutionary ways, adding not only to their well-being of the workforce, but also, I suppose, their output as well. Jamie, welcome to Friday Live. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today. Tell me, give us 60, 90 seconds in your words, because I've just given a potted history, which doesn't do you any justice whatsoever. And so tell us in your words what it is that you actually do.
Well, firstly, thank you, Matthew, for having me on. It is a pleasure and an honour. What I do in a nutshell, if we go right back to the 80s, which is my favourite era, I was diagnosed with something called ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, when I was at school. And so I had to kind of redesign how I worked and lived and studied and then eventually worked, because I didn't really have the energy, because I had a foggy head, got stressed out easily, had difficulty remembering things. I had to kind of learn techniques and skills and processes and use tools to help me in my everyday life. And then so I've always been obsessed with productivity and well-being. I got kind of into the well-being scene quite early days with drinking, probably one of the first people to start drinking herbal teas and meditating. But what really fascinated me was the different ways of being more productive in what I do in my work and outside of work as well. Then start to realize that it's not just me who needs these things, especially in the 21st century, with this overwhelm and busyness and multitasking that we all have. I realized that other people need it too. And so I started sharing some of these techniques, processes, systems, ideas, especially with people who saw, maybe when you mentioned the word well-being or mindfulness, saw it as a little bit fluffy and kind of, oh, that's not for me. You know, especially sort of maybe technical people or, you know, very intellectually clever people, or any of us who have got a lot on and we want to get stuff done, but we don't want to end up, you know, burning out or even just getting exhausted or be anxious. We just want to have a bit of clarity around our work and a bit of freedom, a bit of headspace during our workday, not just seeing it as this, you know, sort of certainly the well-being stuff as the side dish. It's the main course. When we're at work, it's not just, oh, work-life balance, oh, work is bad, life outside is good. You know, dare I say, maybe we could think of it as maybe the crap to fun ratio instead. That you know, that you know, work can sometimes be good and sometimes it can be bad. Outside of work can be good and bad. And so can we you know, maybe create some rails for ourselves and have a bit of a toolkit and a toolbox of ideas for how we like to work and how we get the best out of ourselves, that I'm really fascinated about.
And what strikes me about that is, I mean, you've taken a necessity really with the sort of limiting factors of your health condition, and you've turned it into a virtue through, I suppose, I mean, the other alternative would be you could sort of given up and just succumb to it, but actually you decided, well, no, I still want to be able to be highly productive. I still want to get things done. I want to be able to fight my way through this fog. But actually, what this gives me is a limited amount of time, and we've all got limited time. But yours is got, you know, I suppose, really strongly constrained time, as in these are concrete walls, not the elastic walls that most of us kind of put into our calendars. Because I know myself, like my calendar, it can bleed. It can sort of start to kind of drift into the rest of the hours of the day, but you can't do that. So you've got processes, you've got ways of working that actually drive efficiency because you haven't got a choice. So basically you live every single day like most of us live the day before we go on holiday, when you get 3 times as much done as you normally do. Is that fair?
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I have these systems in place really to kind of get stuff off my mind, really, rather than this idea of you know, my head is a bit of a rubbish office, and I seem to be, and everyone else seems to be using it as one, where things fall out or you forget about things, and that we need to kind of use, we've got tools that we can use, whether it's pen and paper or technology that we can use to kind of externalize some of that thinking, and the lower level stuff that our brains don't really need to hold on to, that we can create some clear space, and then with that space we can focus on just one thing, rather than, we see plenty of people where they'll have there's two screens and they're in email and they're on a conversation and maybe writing a Word document at the same time, and not really focused on any of them, and also maybe thinking about what they're going to be having for lunch, and we're never fully focused on anything. And so I like the idea that I can, and I guess the challenge I have for myself is to be purely in the moment. And like this conversation we're having now, is that I'm not thinking about anything else. It's being purely engaged in what I'm doing.
I love that, and I think a wiser man than me once made the point that attention is a currency. You pay it, and you absolutely need to pay it and be there in the moment. And the greatest courtesy you can give to somebody is to be truly present with them. I mean, what you've just said, though, I mean, it's an interesting point. It's this myth of multitasking. It's this ability to do multiple things simultaneously, and I always think that it goes to that point of being the jack of all trades and the master of none. And actually, if you're doing several things simultaneously, the chances of doing any of them well is fairly slim. Talk to us a little bit about that. What are the sort of biggest mistakes that people and indeed organizations make when it comes to productivity and focus?
I think it's, well, the problem is because we struggle to focus or to have that attention, because you say like attention is a currency, it's finite, it runs out. And we certainly see that, this time in the afternoon, a lot of our attention is waning and we haven't got a lot of it. And so we don't think tactically. It's especially in a collective, in a group of people in an organization, we just maybe are driven by the technology, or driven by, oh, there's a calendar, let's just try and fill it with as many things as we can, or share calendars and just keep putting things in each other's calendars and meetings until we fill the jigsaw puzzle. And then most work comes in and realize that we haven't got any space there to add other things in. We're at capacity. Yeah. And so it's so, but the problem a lot with us as humans and the organizations is that they think the technology itself will be the solution. You know how many people say, "Oh, there's an app for that." Oh, we all love the shiny stuff, and I like everyone else, I love an app. But how many apps and have you used which you've used for a day, a week, and then never to be used again? You think, "Oh, that didn't work for me," and usually it's because it's we're not working out how the technology and our brains work together, and we can do some tailoring of it and we can get them working, and we don't realize that we maybe have more control than we think over our use of the technology.
I think that's a really, really good point. And I mean, I know there's the old cliche of it's a bad workman who blames his tools, but actually, we can create all the tools we like in the world. If we're not actually approaching it, with a degree of focus, and we know exactly what it is we want to use these tools for, in more than just a kind of high level kind of guessing way, it's got to be real. We've got to be able to own these things a little bit. And I suppose, the tools have got to be there to actually facilitate something we're already doing, rather than to actually be the universal panacea and actually cure all of our ills. So what is it that drives that, though? What is it in the human psyche that makes us think that we can do all these things simultaneously and sort of do that kind of distracted squirrel that people do? Well, what is it about human beings that makes us so very distractible?
Well, we've just got a lot, certainly in 21st century life, we've got a lot of stimulation, a lot of shiny stuff where we're like magpies. Oh, this is interesting, that is interesting, and we're certainly overloaded, and certainly through social media, we like that stimulation and that novelty and that of new things, and we're also a bit lazy as well, in that we'd love the tech to just do all the work for us. Of course we would, and it's great. The technology is there; it's a real lever that we can use. but it has to be kind of brain friendly. And we see it with social media. It maybe isn't quite as human friendly as we'd like it to be. And we could have a separate conversation about the social media giants. And dare we say, we're on LinkedIn now, so I better be a little bit quiet. But yeah, it's these systems can be designed to be addictive because, again, going back to attention, that we're in this kind of fragmented attention economy, and everyone wants a little piece of us, and it's almost a race to the bottom of the brain stem. In that all these, it's classic crazy marketing is that we're just being bombarded by things and people wanting a piece of us. That of course our attention and our focus is going to get fragmented, and so we have to be able to say no to them, even if it's just now and again, even if it's just for 15 minutes, and saying no. And I'm not going to go on social media. I'm not going to check my emails. I'm going to sit here and focus on one thing, and then I'm going to decide after that what the next thing is, and the next thing is. Because we end up, our brains are in two camps all of the time, in that we're kind of organizing and thinking what we should be doing. And when we're in that side, we think, oh, I should be doing something. And when we're doing something, we're thinking, oh, is there something else that I should be doing? And then we're never happy when we're in either camp. So we never really get settled. We never get comfortable.
Talk to us about the when we do get settled then, because I mean, really, I'm talking about the state of flow, where you are truly focused on something. In that state, literally hours can go past and you don't even notice the passage of time because you're so focused on what you do. And certainly on the times when I have been most productive in my life, it's when I've been fortunate enough to found myself in this state of flow and true immersiveness on something, and certainly that's a very, very powerful place to be. Talk to us about that, and are there any ways in your experience of getting oneself, I suppose, mentally ready for a state of flow?
Well, yeah, the problem is, especially when we work, and certainly in organizations and we're working with other people, it's really difficult to get into that flow state, into that, into the zone, where you don't feel time passing. You're just there, you're at one with what you're doing. There's maybe two kind of sides to this. One is, we need to get into these flow states, or this deep work and this concentrated work, so we can really be fully engaged in it and give our full brain power and full concentration to it, because it's very rewarding when we do it, and then we do something challenging. But it's hard. Our brains procrastinate. They'll try and resist doing it. And so a lot of the techniques that I talk about is tricking our brain into getting into that flow state and staying in it as much as we can. But you've got the other side of the coin, where you could say, and some productivity people say, well, actually, look, rather than having that, if we're going to have that difficulty getting into a flow state, why don't we just accept that and maybe redesign how we do things in maybe these almost little smaller packets throughout the day. And this goes quite deep into the idea of kind of something called PKM, which is personal knowledge, PKM, personal knowledge management. And this is about where we can work on something, and then we don't quite get into that flow state. It might be over, say, 15 minutes or half an hour, and then we can kind of leave it, and then we can keep it in some sort of form of second brain or externalized system that we can then pick up again later. So we can have in these little pockets, we can start, and we don't have to sort of start thinking all over again. Oh, where was I from something I started this morning? You can almost jump back into it and start moving into that flow state, or getting into it a lot quicker. But you never quite always fully get in the zone, because then you have to go to a meeting or you have to deal with an email or something urgent. And so we can kind of play around with that. That's quite a new concept that looking at. So I'm always looking at these new ideas of, and this is part of course, you might know about just-in-time manufacturing. It's almost like just in time, and we'll always leave things to the last minute. So why don't we just accept that? And we want to do it just the last minute and really quickly. So why don't we just work like that, of just doing something at the last minute, and then build these little packets of information. It's quite a big thing to explain, but there's some really good stuff coming out on that at the moment.
That's really interesting, because that puts me in mind something you and I have discussed previously, which is Parkinson's law, which is one of my all-time favorite. Because I'm the sort of sad person who has favorite kind of psychological laws. Yes, I know I'm very sad. I can't help myself. But yeah, Parkinson's law, for those people who haven't come across it, is this idea that you will use whatever time you've got, and that means quite often you will misuse it. And a great example of how Parkinson's law works is what I alluded to earlier on, with that feeling that you can get 4, 5, 6 times you would normally get done on the day before you go away on holiday, because you know you've got this finite amount of time in which to do it. Another great example is when you've got a tube of toothpaste. In the first kind of week or so of toothpaste heaven, when it's a nice full tube, you're just squeezing it onto the toothbrush, brushing your teeth with that great big long white minty slug. It's just a marvelous thing. Some drops off into the sink, who cares? Doesn't matter. I got loads. And maybe the tube lasts you for what, 2 weeks? Something like that. And then you're down to that tiny last little bit where you have to get your thumb behind it to kind of squeeze it out, get the little, it's still good. There's a bit of minty on my brush, it's all fine. And that like little bit, you can make that last for 2 weeks as well. Our time's a bit like that, so if you can work like that all the time, there's some real strength to that, isn't there?
Yeah. And so if you could kind of build in some, if you haven't got much spaces of time, you can then think about, well, what can I do in those pockets of time? Or if you have got all the time of the day, and you've got one thing that needs to get done, you probably spend all day doing it and trying to perfect it. And so I like the idea of putting in some artificial constraints during the day to bring those deadlines forward, and actually put some time deadlines in for yourself, maybe to achieve particular milestones, and that's where kind of time blocking and time boxing can kind of come in and be quite a simple method to kind of get momentum.
I'm looking at this. I'm thinking about, for those people who haven't read Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg, great book, but the Fogg behavioral model says that behaviors take place need to be 3 elements present, which is motivation to do it, ability, which means you can actually you have competency to do it technically, but also there are few constraints on doing it, and also there's a trigger or prompt, whichever you prefer. So those 3 elements have to be present. So I suppose let's assume that motivation levels are where they need to be in order to get these things done. Where does the sort of adding constraints bit work? I mean, I guess that's going to sit around the ability side, is it? It just sort of helps you to actually do these things and focus. How's it working from that point of view?
It's like, because I always think of it with regard to the habits, with the trigger, the behavior, the reward, with the habit loop. Charles Duhigg, and BJ Fogg's great, and people like James Clear with Atomic Habits. I like the trigger. I like thinking trigger, behavior, rewards, and that idea of, okay, if we want to get something done, we need the trigger to start to remind us to do it. And then that's, even if we have a trigger there and say, oh yeah, there's something on my to-do list there, there's the trigger to remind me to do it, still doesn't mean you're going to do it and actually get to the behavior. And so we need to have some tricks up our sleeves to fool our brain into starting. Simple things like, the Pomodoro technique, time blocking, having a little timer, whether it's digital or physical there, to actually kickstart things. And so rather than, and with time blocking, the issue that how we trick our mind into doing things is that the trigger there is just starting the clock. So just setting the timer to your, whatever it is, 25, 30 minutes, an hour and a half, and just setting the clock. And that is your trigger to start the behavior. And then you don't therefore worry about what you're going to be doing. All you have to do is think about, all I do is turn the clock. So beforehand, because normally before something, your brain starts getting in this brainstorm of, oh goodness, all these things about the actual project or task itself. But if we change the trigger and the behavior, and then the behavior is just to start the clock, is then there's this anxiety, and then we just start moving into it.
So we've got some nice artificial constraints that can really sort of make us focus and actually give us a set time in which we have to do this thing. We've got nice, easy triggers that are nice, easy to follow. What about on the other side of it, the less desirable behaviors, the things that come along and distract us? You refer to meetings and emails and things like that, because those are behaviors as well. So I mean, presumably they also have triggers and prompts and that thing. So and indeed both intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So talk to us about that. Well, how do you remove the distraction, or at least mitigate it, or how do you recommend your clients do that?
Well, we've got two types of distraction. We've got that external distraction, and we've got the distraction from in here as well. So that external distraction might be from in the form of interruption from other people and from communication. And of course, when we were all in the office, that might be someone tapping on you on the shoulder and saying, "Have you got a minute?" But of course, you know, a lot of us are at home now, and so and even before that, we'd have instant messenger pops up. Oh, can you just answer this question? Or we've got email through, and we get the distraction of the ping and the noise of the next thing that comes through. And then when we're in a meeting as well, then we're distracted by what maybe other things that we could be doing as well. And all these channels, all these communication channels are always on. And if they're always on, we're always going to be distracted. There's always going to be something else new, shiny, more interesting than what we're doing right now. And so we end up keeping that to-do list usually in our heads. We're prioritizing rapidly all the time of what we should be doing next. So to kind of mitigate that, we should be really having time during the day when we haven't got that distraction from external events and things for moments, so we can concentrate on doing the tasks, because most of work involves either communication or you getting things done, and maybe in a group, or a lot of the time just you on your own, doing all the actions from all the meetings and the communication. The more of that communication you have, the more questions and tasks are going to come from that. And it's setting aside time to do that work. And a lot of it usually, and I certainly see this in big organizations, just gets pushed usually to the evenings and to the weekends. And we never keep up.
That resonates hugely from my own experience of reasonable sized corporate companies. You know, it's this time pressure constantly to be, I suppose, just hot and cold running time. You know, basically your time is somebody else's plaything quite often. But I mean, quite apart from the fact that does point to some cultural issues in some organizations, it also speaks to, I think, maybe a leadership issue, which is that, you know, from a leadership and management point of view, very often, you know, with the best of intentions, managers quite often don't understand themselves, and therefore they don't really understand how to get the best out of their people either. And rather than shielding them from acts of idiocy from above, actually what's happening is that they will loop their team in on every email. They'll CC them on everything, and basically, rather than communication, which is tension, you get a wall of bullshit, which is the actual outcome, which is really very, very unhelpful. Forgive my language, by that. This is one of those subject areas that I get a little bit frisky about, I get a bit excited about. It's a huge frustration a lot of organizations, because they are losing millions and millions and millions of pounds every single year. I mean, the UK PLC must be flushing billions down the toilet through basically a failure to understand basic human psychology when it comes to this thing. And I blame the Victorians, because, you know, it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that the word priority suddenly acquired a plural. There's no such thing as priorities. There is a priority, one thing that is important. You can't focus on more than one thing at a time. And that just, anyway, sorry, I go off on one a little bit. I do apologize, Jamie. But
no,
bring it
right.
Go on, Tom.
But you're right in that, but it's not, people always think, oh, with leadership in organizations that, and it's like, oh, the leaders are the, that's where the, they're having real difficulty. I can never speak with my boss. They're always busy. And basically because they're spinning so many plates, and they end up becoming the bottleneck, because we're all feeding that communication into them. They're feeding lots of and CCing people in, out, and they end up becoming the administrator, and not the leader. And they can't keep on top of all the email and that communication, and things get, and there's some great leadership stuff out there, and how to be a great leader, but what we don't really see is, and think about is, could they change the way that they work there and design their day differently, so they aren't getting overwhelmed with all this information. They can keep on top of it. It's basically having some relaxed control and be on top of their work, surfing on top of it, not drowning in this flood of crazy communication and tasks that we can have. They can get some form of order from the chaos. And for most people, they're living in chaos. They're drowning in it, and that then leads to people stressing out. And so I like the idea of that we can have some systems and processes in place where these people can, whether they're managers or people within a team, can get some form of being on top of their work, having some relaxed control. And all of this stuff it's mindfulness, but it's disguised in a cloak of productivity. And so we can be fully present in our work as we're doing our work.
I love that. So basically, I've just got an image in my head of like when you have to feed a very unpalatable pill to a small child, you wrap it in sugar. So basically, in order to feed the unpalatable pill of well-being and mindfulness to the hard-nosed bean counters, you can wrap it in the sugary goodness of productivity, because guess what? That's going to benefit your bottom line. So will well-being, by the way. That will also help your bottom line, because taking a people-focused strategy is not a bad idea. But anyway, look, I think it's worth us just sort of bringing things up to a bit of a close, because believe it or not, we are already hitting the top of our half hour. I did tell you, didn't I? I said it'll going to go lightning fast, but there you go. We could talk for hours about this stuff, Jamie. I'm sort of concerned that people don't know how to get in touch with you, and I know that you can add huge value to a lot of people out there. I'm sure that a lot of what you've been talking about has resonated with people. So tell me, how is it that people can best reach out and get in touch with you?
Best way to reach out is you can go to jamiesquires.co.uk, my website, and you can find out a little bit more about me and contact me via there, or simply jamie@jamiesquires.co.uk. Drop me an email. Again, I'm on LinkedIn there as well, always up for conversation around these kind of productivity, well-being topics. And yeah, that's about it.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, look, if anybody who's seen you on LinkedIn already, they'll be very familiar with the room that you're currently standing in, and very familiar with that shelf that's behind you, which always has different records on it. And I can spy a couple of 80s or early 90s kind of classics in the background there. Tell us, we've got like a minute left, so quickly tell us what's going on with the records behind you.
Well, with my, with the workshops and the coaching that I do for groups of people in organisations, productivity and well-being, it's a hard subject. It's a dry subject, and not many people it resonates with. So you've got to make it, these serious topics, fairly light and understandable, and get people to engage in it and to be interested and to really get it. So because I love music and I love very deep philosophy, but I also like the trivial of the top 40 music, is that if we could maybe merge these two bits of fun and the serious stuff together, it'll help people to get it. And so where we could, I use kind of song titles and where we can play on the titles of the idea of where we could think about ourselves and our brains and the technology and the productivity, how we can tie these things together. So it really resonates with people.
Brilliant. I love it. I'm a huge believer. If you're not laughing, you're not learning. You need to keep it human. It needs to be real, so that we can actually achieve genuine understanding, which is what real communication is. Real communication is not a pile of flipping emails. Anyway, thank you very much indeed, Jamie. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here this week. Have you enjoyed it?
I've loved it. As you say, the time has flown, and yeah, really enjoyed our discussion. Thanks, Matthew.
Fantastic. Great to have you. See you next week for another Friday Live. Whatever it is you're doing for this bank holiday weekend, make sure you do it safely. Have a good time. Enjoy. And yes, I shall see you all in a week's